Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you're having a good morning. We're going to do something a little different, a little more topical. We're going to do a top 5 list. It's not something I've done a whole bunch of, but we're going to take a look at how tanks have changed, whether they really have. What are the top 5 tanks? Now, what I want you guys to do down in the comments is leave your top 5 tanks down there and let me know what they are. And this is going to be very personal for each person, and I'm going to narrow it down just a little bit more, and we're going to do top 5 tech tree tanks. These are tanks that anybody can grind up to, and the qualifications are going to be the must-have tanks, right? Top 5 must-have tanks that you can grind to, and that's going to include to some extent the lines to get through them. So I've got my little list here. There are 5 tanks on this list. 2 of them are tier 7s. So tier 7s, which you may not want to go further in, but the tier 7s are very much worth getting. One will be a bit of a surprise, I'm pretty sure. Then we're going to have 2 tier 10s. And then, of course, number 5 is going to be a personal favorite of me. It will be the Conqueror gun carriage. It's right here. I'm just kidding. That is not on my list. That is not on my list at all. I hope it's not on your list. I mean, it could be, but I don't know. So, each update brings new machines, new vehicles to the game. And sometimes that changes what everyone's favorite is. Sometimes the old standbys stick around. And we actually have an oldie but a goodie. We have a relatively new tank on the list. We have one for the memes. We have one that is just a fantastic all-rounder at tier 10. And like I said, my own personal favorite, the surprise, which for anybody who has watched my channel, they can probably all guess what that's going to be. So let's create our own list of the must-play tanks in World of Tanks. According to Guido, let's get started. All right, the first tank exists in the USA line, one of the better lines in the game, and starts at the T1 like most of them do, but you're going to make a beeline straight through that M2 Light, M3 Stewart, T6 Medium, right into the heavy line with the T1 and the M6, both pretty good heavies in their own right, not painful to play, and you're going to head right for our first choice, the T29, probably one of the elder statesmen in the game, absolutely, and still holds up to today. This is a tank with a bunch of gun depression, hits hard, a turret that stands up to tier 9 tanks, enough speed to get you where you want, but not so fast you get in a lot of trouble, which is really good for beginning players. So let's take a look at the T29. Well, here it is in garage, what you would consider the elder statesman of my list. This tank has been around since the very beginning. Tier 7 heavy T29. Development of this experimental heavy tank started in 44. Prototype was built in 47, so there's actually a vehicle built of this one, but production was halted when heavy tanks were deemed unnecessary. So the T29, look at that bad boy. Let's jump over and take a look. We're using the comparison tool that Wargaming has. Here in the comparison tool, we've got the T29, the IS, and the Tiger 1, which are 3 of the iconic tanks in the game. 320 alpha on the T29, 390 on the IS, and 280 on the Tiger 1 means that the T20 lives between those two. Remember, the Tiger recently got a buff to its alpha, so it was much lower at 240. Penetration is nice at 198, and that's the trade-off you get with the IS, with less penetration for the more alpha. The nice thing about a comfortable tank like the T29 is it lives in between those, has good penetration for the gun that it has. So 198 with 320 alpha. Come down here, and there's a couple of the big selling points for the T29. Obviously, the gun depression is -10, and that is huge for World of Tanks, being able to peek over ridges and use all the terrain. Around -8, especially at -10 or above, that is where the maps are designed such that your tank will be able to use that depression. Once you hit -10, there are almost no good positions on the maps that you cannot use, and that is fantastic. Aiming time at 2.21, which is the best of these 3. Dispersion is a little bit painful at 0.4, but with given enough equipment and good crew, directives, food, things like that, you can really bring that down. That's probably one of the bigger weaknesses. The gun can be a little bit inaccurate, but it is not too bad. And remember, you've got that massive, strong turret to use, so that if you do happen to miss and there's a return shot coming your way with 279 millimeters on the front of the turret, you are, and I don't want to say you're guaranteed, but you are pretty well going to bounce just about anything coming your way other than the highest penetration TD rounds at tier 9. So this thing is just going to bounce things nicely. The hull is a little bit low at 102, so you do want to avoid showing your hull, but as long as you can just go hull down and keep that turret only being exposed during your trades, this thing is an absolute beast. Let's jump back up real quick and note that its DPM is a little bit low. Its reload is relatively long at 10.93, so as compared to these other two, the IS is a little slower, but for the Tiger at 7.41. For example, the heavy tanks like the Tiger, who are going to reload much quicker. What that means is you're going to need to be a little bit more careful with your shots, but that's the beauty of a tank with a turret like the T-29. It will give you that time to get back, maybe bounce a shot or two and get yourself reloaded. Speed-wise, it is doing 35 kilometers an hour, which is right in line with the IS, a little bit slower than the Tiger 1. Traverse speed is decent in there. Hit points are pretty good. Let's back up here. We're at 1250. Not as good as the Tiger 1, which has that nice 1500, but enough hit points to stay in the fight right there. Concealment, it's a heavy tank at tier 7, so it doesn't have a whole lot of concealment. And the beauty, the last piece, the beauty piece, 380 meters on the view range is really nice for a tier 7 heavy tank. American tanks tend to have pretty good view range all around. T-29, my friends, one of the more iconic tanks in the game, and absolutely a tank that you're going to want to grind to on the American heavy line. Questionable whether you want to go past that. The 110E5 is pretty good, but you cannot miss at tier 7 with the T-29. Highly recommend you try that. Let's go to the second one, a sleeper. Well, my friends, this is going to be a bit of a shock, but the second of my top 5 must-play tanks in the tech tree exists in the Polish line, and it is in fact the CS-44 Tier 7 Polish medium tank. I know this is going to cause some serious consternation among people, but take a look at how well this thing is doing in the game. Look at any of the stat sites. Another questionable line. Not sure you want to go past. The tier 8 is very difficult to play. Not great at all. The other two are okay. But I'm telling you, at tier 7, easy to get to for new players. The CS-44 is an absolute monster of a tank, medium tank at tier 7. Highly recommend that you grab this thing, at least grind through the Polish line up to tier 7 and get yourself a CS-44. Fantastic. So what does the CS-44 bring to the table? I know you're sitting there looking at this video saying, Guido, you have lost your ever-loving mind. There is no way the CS-44 is one of the top 5 tech tree tanks, and I'm telling you, it is. The numbers aren't great. They really aren't when you just take them individually, but when you put the whole thing together, this tank really does a nice job dishing out the damage. And to be quite honest, it's a little bit similar to the T-29 as far as a tank that hits hard, doesn't reload particularly fast, but can still get the rounds downrange and keep you in the game, because the armor on this thing is surprising. I won't tell you that it's T-29-esque in the turret, but for a medium tank at tier 7, this armor can be very, very trollish. Take a look at the details on this thing. A project, a medium tank developed by students of Warsaw University of Technology in the latter half of the 1940s. So this is one of those project tanks, not one that they built a prototype of or was in production. And it is a very interesting looking tank. It's got the very rounded armor, pretty good turret on this thing. But let's take a look at it in comparison with a couple other tier 7 mediums that you might recognize. All right, comparison. I've chosen the Panther and the T-20, two of the, these are the elder statesmen of the tier 7 mediums right here. Panther, the iconic Panther, and the T-20, the versatile all-rounder for the United States line. medium tier 7s, and of course the CS44. I didn't mention this, but what I do here in this comparison tool is strip all of the buffs off of it and give them 100% crew. So it is a baseline, fully configured tank for the tech tree, but is no food, there's no equipment, there's no buffs at all, and those are the numbers that you're going to see, so we get a fair comparison. Looking at the CS44, it has obviously that big gun hitting for 300. That can be a great fear factor, keeping people off of you. The pen is okay at 168, not Panther level, but better than the T20. Remember, the trade-off here, though, with the Panther is that it's shooting very fast with a low average damage of, 135. My goodness. The CS44 at 300. The loading does take some time, so that's going to be the trade-off. With a high alpha, typically it's a slower loading kind of gun. Gun traverse is very nice, and gun depression is -6. This is maybe one of the bigger knocks on this tank. -6 can be hard to use, but it's just about enough to work most of the good spots in the game with just a little bit of wiggling and jiggling, but it's not the -10 comfortableness of a T20. Aiming time, though, is fantastic, and the dispersion is okay at 0.38. But where this thing shines is when you can carefully get the hits down range with your 300 alpha and decent penetration right there. Also, the big surprise on the CS44, and I think it's one of the things that keeps it alive, keeps it in the game to the mid and late game, it's because its armor is very trollish. It's actually quite good for a medium. 140 on the hull and 150 on the turret. People get surprised because they're going to shoot the turret, or sorry, shoot the hole thinking about a lull pin. All I have to do is aim at it. It's a medium. I'll just hit it in the turret. And if you remember, it was quite curved, this whole armor. And if you put any angle on it, or they hit near the top or the bottom of the curve, you can get quite a few of those auto bounce situations. It's very trollish and will surprise people. Hit points are okay, a little bit on the low side. We talked about the armor. Mobility is quite good at 57, so it definitely gets around the battlefield. That is very, very good. Specific power, the top of these three right here, which means it will get up and go and get 257 kilometers an hour pretty well. Camo is actually decent at 14, not bad, 14 and 10 while moving. And the view range at 380 is competitive, slightly below the T20. Now, none of those numbers really stands out other than the alpha is pretty good. I did not mention the DPM, which looks low, but remember, folks, another thing I didn't mention earlier, DPM is great. All else being equal, you would like to have it, but the question is usable DPM. Usable DPM. And this tank has other things going for it that makes its DPM more usable than, say, the Panther or the T20. I'm telling you, take a look at its stats. It is doing absolutely fantastically. It is a great, great tank. Number 3, we're going to move on to tier 10. So we have those two nice tier 7 very comfortable tanks, quite good tanks. We're going to move on to my third pick for top 5. And this one's for the memes, my friends. For the memes, it is going to be the FV 4005, the turreted TD, the cousin to the Death Star Junior. I don't know. The FV has been removed from the tech tree. It's a special vehicle now, but this FV 4005 version of the FV comes through the Achilles, Challenger, Charioteer, and Conway line, and one of the reasons I picked this is the whole line is good. Once you split off on the Achilles, you start working with turrets. All of these are quite good TDs, can easily swing into being a medium or a heavy if need be, really until you get to the 4005, and then you just have an absolute monster of a tank. And here it is in the garage, the larger, taller tanks in the game, sporting the Galahad 3D style that Wargaming came out with for the 4005. It is a tank destroyer project developed on the basis of the Centurion in the early 50s. It was initially tested with a mechanized ammo rack. Thank goodness it doesn't have an autoloader. However, that rack did not fit in the turret. How does something not fit in that turret? I don't know. Vehicle never entered mass production. There was one of them built. For this one, let's just take a quick look before we look at a comparison at the ammo, because this is really where the meme part comes and what you want to take a look at. The armor piercing is doing 1,150 with 310 penetration. The Hesh is 1,750 with 230 pen, and the HE is the same, 1,750 with 92 pen. Hesh is a bit of a special kind of ammo that British tanks have, and obviously HE just blows up anything. Hesh doesn't quite do that. It's similar mechanics. It can be eaten by tracks, spaced armor. The thing about Hesh is it's relatively low penetration overall, but when it does penetrate, that's where the memes come from. When you delete an entire tier 8 heavy with one shot, that is the joy of the 4005, and one of probably the biggest reason I recommend that you go through this line. What I talked about earlier, that all of those turreted TDs are quite good, and the payoff is to get this great big beast. The shoot barn, as I say, there's a ruder word that people use, and it can really enrage your enemies when you drop that Hesh round on someone and you delete 1,700 hit points or more off of a heavy tank and they're back in garage. That is the joy of the 4005. Well, we're going to go ahead and compare it against the 110E3 and the JPZ E100. One of those has a relatively comparable gun, but a bunch more armor, and the other one's just a bunch of armor in the 110E3. So we take a look at this, and obviously the sell point of the FV4005 is that 1,150 average damage with 310 penetration. It must be noted here, though, that that penetration is for the standard round, and while it does beat the 110E3 and the JPZ, the special round, the Hesh round for the 4005, has less pen for the giant payoff. So the 110E3 and JPZ with a gold round will do much better than 310. It does require, with the 4005, a little bit of aiming, and that can be problematic. So I haven't gone over a lot of equipment and things like this in these reviews, but if you're playing tier 10, my recommendation is to make sure you have all the right equipment on there and that you're running food if you want the full payoff for a tank like this. Why? Because when we get down into the other stats, things like the rate of fire and the dispersion and the aiming time, you can see it needs some help. At 3.55 and a 0.4 dispersion, this tank takes forever to load. But again, you're grinding and playing this game for that payoff because you want to delete people with that single shot. 90 degrees on the turret. It has a turret, my friends. It has a turret. That is such a flexibility over and above the casemates, whose field of regard is generally much smaller than 90 degrees on the FV4005. So the turret does help this tank out quite a bit. Look at that, just the average damage at 2,399. The 110E3 and the JPZ are running a little higher, but again, I keep going back to it, the payoff. Note that the armor is near non-existent. 14 millimeters on the turret. That means any kind of HE is going to pen the turret. This is not a tank you want to rush forward like the JPZ or the 110E3. Start brawling, going hold down and locking down parts of the map up front. Take this and lock down parts of the map from the back in a nice bush or a protected position and await your opportunity to drop 1,700 on people with your Hesh. Absolutely fantastic. Top speed is 32. That's decent. Will get you where you need to be. As a matter of fact, that's enough to get away if your flank starts to collapse. And that's what you're going to want to do with this thing, because the reload time is astronomical. Rate of fire 2.09. That takes forever. 28.76. Again, why you want to run food and some things to buff your reload time, equipment and things such as that. Stationary and moving camo is near zero. It's gigantic. Pretty good view range at 390, so it is able to see, but it is so big, it is also able to be seen. I haven't done a whole lot of gameplay in this top 5, but I felt like since I talked up the gun so well, I needed to show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Malinovka 4005, scouts getting into the bushes, cockroaches on the other team scurrying, trying to get away. What's this? Mr. 50-/51. You are in the sights of the FV. It's gone dark. We have fired, and boom. One more example. Let me show you. Continuing with picking on TVPs. Oh, there's another one. Oh man, let's move on to the next tank. Number four, the fourth tank that I think you should really grind through the tech tree and grab is going to be another Tier 10, the STB1. So we have the Elder Statesman T29, we have the newcomer, the CS44, we have the Meme Machine 4005, and just for an all-rounder, fantastic Tier 10 medium tank that can do some of everything, it's the STB1 tank, the Tier 10 Japanese medium tank. Unlike some of the others we talked about, who had some pretty good grinds, this one can be a little wonky and difficult. The Chi-Ri is an odd tank. Cheeto is okay, not amazing. The STA1 and the Type 61 really start to shine. And then when you get the STB1, it is a fantastic Tier 10. So it is highly recommended by me and one of my top 5 tanks to own in World of Tanks on the tech tree. And here it is in garage, the STB1, one of the more classic looking tanks. Just great lines, really good looking tank. Model's fantastic. It is sporting the Winter Sakura, Winter Lotus. Winter Lotus Sakura is a different camo. Very cool looking camo. Nice 3D camo on there as well. It was a prototype manufactured by Mitsubishi, and it was in a military parade. apparently it wasn't used past then. So just a really good looking tank and has some very nice things going for it. One of those is that -14 depression with some hydraulic action going on, and the fact that it absolutely spits rounds down range. This is a great all-rounder, and with a recent buff to its turret, and we'll talk about that in a minute, has really just brought this thing out to the forefront. You will notice with my setup, and I don't have a particularly great crew, I am sitting at 3,702 average DPM. Let's take a look at it. We will compare it to the Leopard and the 430U. It's kind of Leopard-esque, a little bit slower, and it's kind of 430U-esque with a decent turret, but not quite as good. So 360 average damage, that is lower than these other two. They hit harder. Penetration 258 is lower than the Leopard, higher than the 430U. It gets 330, I want to say, with the gold round. But look at that rate of fire, 8.81, 6.81 loading. And again, this is a base tank at its top configuration, which most Tier 10s are, without any buffs yet. So we come down here. Mine was sitting at 3,700 in garage. Let me know what yours is, because I bet it's higher. 3,173 DPM. This thing will absolutely spit it down range. 1.92 on the aiming time. The gun is not as good as a Leopard 1, but it is Leopard 1-esque. It very much is Leopard 1-esque. 0.35 dispersion is really pretty good. Again, the Leopard's a bit of an outlier right there, but the traverse speed is very fast indeed at 52, so very comfortable moving your gun around, getting those snapshots off, especially if you're able to use that hold down capability with the hydraulics. We'll take a look at that in a little bit later. 2,000 on the hit points, which is nice and high, and look at that whole armor. 110, pretty darn good, not quite 430U good, not as angled as a 430U, and 222 on the turret. The recent buff to the turret has made the turret usable. I would not call it an auto pen. It is certainly not as strong as a 430U, but with the ridge poking that you're going to do with this tank, it is certainly not Leopard 1 levels of 52, so you will expect some bounces, and couple that with the hydraulics, and this thing is just an absolute beast of a ridge fighter. Just a great all-rounder. Good gun to get the rounds down range. Lots of shots because of the rate of fire and how high it is. Lots of DPM. There's just so many possibilities with the STB1 on the maps that we have. Traverse speed added to the turret speed very easily gets the gun on lines. Camo is decent down here, and the view range is 400. Fantastic. Not the 410 the Leopard has, but right up there. Last but not least, number 5, the 5th tank. And I told you this was going to be a surprise to many and not to some. This is another sleeper, and I choose the Manticore. Now, hold on. Don't go crazy. Don't go crazy. I am telling you that this is a really fun tank. Okay? When you do a top 5, it doesn't have to be all the very best top stats tank. Remember, we also said it would be tech tree only for this particular top 5. But I'm also going with the fun factor on this one. And we're talking about a line that splits off from the Cruiser 1. And when you get to the setter, the LHMTV, the G-Sword, and the Manticore, that is where you start to learn what a little assassin is all about in this game. The British light tanks, absolute sneaky little assassins. They can be a lot of fun, and I will tell you, if you can play one of these good, if you can do well in one of these kind of tanks, you are a good player. You are a good player. So I highly recommend you go up the British light tank line. Don't listen to anything anyone has said. They're wrong. They're very fun. They're good tanks. They really, really are. So let's take a look at the Manticore. Here it is, Monty the Manticore. I've got the big twofers on. I have bedazzled it with my Chuck Norris stuff. As you can see, Chuck is in there along with Captain Wurlitzer, two special characters. And let's take a quick look on the old details. A light tank project with an oscillating turret for providing anti-tank defense behind infantry positions. No prototypes. Well, that's too bad because they should have made this thing. Looks like it was meant to be some kind of TD. It's a very unique tank in World of Tanks, as is the entire British light tank line. Couple knocks against them. One of the biggest one is it's only 2 crew. That can hurt, especially at tier 10 when you've ground through with 3 crew members. You lose one of the crew members and it's hard to get enough of the skills that matter. You can see that I've spent a bunch of books making this crew as good as possible. I'm running a CVS. I have some purple equipment with the experimentals. Could be Bond, I don't know. There's so many different ones. And then we have the low noise exhaust. And this is going to bring me to, the reason I'm saying it, my camo for stationary and moving at 52.06. You can see I'm running pudding or running food, pudding and tea. My British friends tell me that's not a thing, but hey, you know what? The guys in the Manticore, especially Chuck, they love it, and it helps them. And then, of course, I'm running directives. This is full tryhard mode and a full gold loadout. I don't always recommend that. In this particular tank with only 20 rounds, I do. This is a really fun tank, my friends. It's got a lot going for it. And it is another on my list, much like the CS44. When you look at the numbers, do not be dismayed. Do not let your hearts hurt or get sad. I'm telling you, go through the British light tank, get yourself a Manticore, and join the Monty the Manticore. All right, we'll jump over to the comparison tool. You can see I've picked the T100 LT, another tracked, widely considered the best, actually, light tank at tier 10, and the EBR 105. Now, I know this is a best of, but we're talking about fun as well, and just a great tank, and that's the Manticore. I included the EBR because kind of the natural enemy of the Manticore, and while it's not a tracked light tank, it'll give us a little bit of compare and contrast, because another tank at the light in the light class at tier 10 that people are going to really like is the EBR. 390 average damage. Penetration is nice at 248. Remember, you only have 20 shells, so you need to make those things count on the Manticore. Rate of fire is low. We're going to dive down here to average DPM. It is one of the knocks against the Manticore at 1,743. My friends, usable DPM. The Manticore, if you can move it into the right positions, and we'll talk a little bit about why it can do that in just a moment, then you get a lot of usable DPM. All right, if you can get the Manticore to the mid to late game, I am telling you, it is an absolute assassin. -8 gun depression is nice. Painful on the elevation. Be careful about back slopes. Looking up can be a problem at only +8. It's one of the few tanks in the game that has that bad of elevation, and that can be a bit painful. Gun traverse is a little bit slow. That is very TD-esque. Remember, we talked about it was basically a TD. So the turret does not move very fast. You do need to be careful. Aiming time is really good at 1.9, and dispersion is okay at 0.38, but it's not as bad as the T100 LT at 44, and slightly worse than the EBR. As I said, the DPM is not great. We'll go ahead and slide this up. There is not much armor on this thing. Hull, it's got 80 turret. That's better than the EBR. It's certainly nowhere near the 180 that the 100 LT has. So any bounces you get with the Manticore are going to be more or less auto ricochet angles and luck, things like that. The mobility is pretty good. A top speed of 68 is nice, not quite as fast as the 100 LT, and obviously not as fast as the EBR, especially when it's in its turbo mode. Traverse speed's okay, a little bit slow in there as well, but now we're getting to the crux of the matter, and then I will give you the one X factor that is not taken into account very much when we're just looking at stats. The first thing then is that the camo is fantastic at 20. Somehow it's less than the EBR 105, which hurts my heart, and I don't understand based on how fast the EBR is. But anyway, that's part of the balancing of the game. View range is 400, so it tops well above the EBR 105, and that's what this thing is all about, is getting eyes on the view range. And then the X factor I said I would talk about. The physical size of the tank is extremely small. This means that the Manticore can use very small bushes and positions that many other tanks, most really, can't use. And this is a characteristic from the setter all the way through on the British light tank line. And I'm telling you, if you can learn how to leverage that and get good at that part of the game, using strange positions that other people can't, I'm telling you that you are going to increase your capability in this game, and it will open up new avenues for you to investigate. It's great. I'm telling you, I know I'm gushing a bit about it. This is my number 5 pick, and I know it's not going to be a popular one. That's all right. Let me know down below how much you dislike the fact that I put the Manticore in the top. The comment section is going to explode, but I hope that there are a couple converts who might want to give this a chance. And remember, we're talking about a top 5 in the tech tree. These are the lines I recommend you should. They are the must grind lines, and I've given you a reason for each one. And the reason for this one is to be the unseen assassin annoying tank at the end of the game. I'm telling you, it's one of the best parts about this game. One of the best parts. All right, let's take a look at some gameplay. The sneaky assassin. Lots of tanks left sneaking around, doing things like this. Goodbye, Mr. Arda, and he is gone. And now for the final act, the very dangerous FV 4005. Monty finds him. He tries to move back into his little hidey hole, takes some damage, gets hit in the face. Remember, it didn't have any turret armor. Oh, look, there's the Artie as well. There's the Artie as well. We have eyes on. We're doing that Monty the Manticore thing. Nearly 4,000 assist. Another shot on him. Why don't we just keep on shooting here? Let's see. How about that guy? A little shot for him. Very nice. A little shot for him. 2,700. That guy's dead. More assist coming in. And the 261 dies. Well, I know you're disappointed that the Churchill gun carrier, as you can see in my garage, was not on the list. Maybe next time we'll take a look at it. So I gave you 5 tanks that I thought you really needed to grind and have in your garage. We have 2 tier 7s. For those of you who might not want to get the higher tiers, the Elder Statesman T29, the newcomer CS44, which I think is surprising a lot of people. I got 2 tier 10s, or actually 3. One of them is the meme machine for all of your one-shot needs. The other one is the great all-rounder STB1 on the Japanese line. Benefit of having a really nice grind, especially in the 8 and 9 tiers for that one. And then my personal favorite, had to throw that in there, the Manticore, a tank which, if you can do well in, is going to indicate that you are indeed a very good World of Tanks player. Thanks for coming by and checking out my top 5 tanks that I think you need to have in your garage today. That's all I've got. We will see you.